my colleague Jeanette Shaw. My colleague Jeanette Shaw, who coordinates our federal policy work, but wasn't able to be here today. So I'll present a couple of slides from her. Okay, next slide, Connor. So talk quickly about some happenings in the Oregon legislature this year. We were excited to pass our top priority bill in the 2021 session, which many of you know has got about another month left. But so we worked with the governor's office and with PG and Pacific Power to pass House Bill 2165, which does make some pretty major changes to the EV rebate program that we're pretty excited about. So it makes some nonprofits eligible for the charge ahead, low income qualified charge ahead rebate that many of you probably know about. As you can see there, it also removes the removes the sunset on the overall rebate program. It was slated to sunset at the end of 2024, I believe, or 2023 and beginning of 2024. And then most excitingly for us, it doubles the amount of the charge ahead rebate. So as many of you may know now, there's a standard rebate of $2,500, and low to moderate income folks can get an additional $2,500, which can be used also on a used car. So this bill will double the charge ahead rebate so that income qualified folks can now get up to $5,000 off a used vehicle, or $7,500 off a new vehicle. So pretty excited about the expansion of that. Another portion of the bill does require a minimum 0.25 investment, 25% investment in transportation electrification by the investor-owned utilities, and requires that they put a focus for some of that spending on underserved communities. So, you know, a little bit of a utility impact there, and I'll talk a little bit more about the rate basing provisions of that bill in a minute. And then that bill was signed by Governor Brown on May 26th. Next slide, Connor. Thank you, sir. So yeah, so another one we're excited about. For those of you who have been following the legislature might have heard about this one too, House Bill 2180. It was a redo of a bill that we passed out of the House and had gotten most of the way through the Senate in the 2020 session, but requires that 20% of parking spaces for all new commercial development and multifamily units of multifamily residences of 5 or more units be made EV ready. So installing the conduit and so forth under the parking lot, not, you know, and leaving enough space in the breaker box, not requiring the installation of the chargers. But so yeah, we thought we had that one on track to pass in the 2020 session. Got stalled because of the walkout, but did pass this session, and just learned that the governor signed that bill today. So excited about that one. It could, I think, have some potential effects on utilities in terms of, you know, potentially having to upgrade, you know, substations and so forth when chargers go in multi-unit dwelling sort of thing. So I just wanted to flag that for this group. Next slide, Connor. And then just quickly, a few other bills of note. Part of the governor's bill, House Bill 2165, did allow the Pacific Power and PGE to rate base their investments in transportation electrification. And so that bill, the rate basing provisions got incorporated in the governor's bill. So these other two rate basing bills, House Bill 2476 and Senate Bill 314, kind of fell by the wayside, although there was some provisions in Senate Bill 314 that allowed gas utilities, specifically Northwest Natural, to rate base their investments in transportation electrification. And so those provisions are getting incorporated into this House Bill 3055 you see here. There was also a bill, Senate Bill 333, which directs the Oregon Department of Energy to study the benefits of renewable hydrogen production in the state and report back to the legislature in September of next year. And then some of you may be following the 100% Clean Bill, House Bill 2021, which is in Ways and Means right now. Fourth hasn't really been engaged too much in that bill, but it'll require, if it passes, it would require the retail electricity providers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with electricity sold to Oregon consumers to 80% below baseline emissions by 2030, 90% below baseline emissions levels by 2035, and 100% by 2040. So that is all still kind of in flux as the session proceeds. And so we'll see where that one goes. Next slide, Connor. So just a few other Oregon policy pieces to hit. A lot of you probably followed the Clean Fuels rulemaking that happened earlier this year to increase the funding for transportation electrification they established this incremental credit program. And so the status of that one right now is that their DEQ is convening an equity advisory committee, which will then help them select the incremental aggregator for those clean fuels, these new incremental credits that will be coming out of the Clean Fuels program. And then another rulemaking is going to be starting later this year to expand the Clean Fuels program and set new benchmarks of 20% below 2015 levels by 2030, and then 25% below 2015 levels by 2035. Then a number of you probably were also tracking the Transportation Electrification Infrastructure Needs Analysis, or TINA project that ODOT is leading on. Fourth was on that project team, is on that project team, and is probably a number of the folks on this call were tracking that process, or potentially even on the advisory committee that ODOT assembled. And so that the final report on that big project, which is just kind of a state of the state of electric charging in the state, and what are the policy options that we're going to need to pursue to close those gaps so that we can get EV infrastructure everywhere. So that final report is being worked on right now after it was presented to the advisory group last month, and it'll be going to the governor at the end of this month. So then, and lastly, the PUC is working, got a rulemaking going on, UM 2165, to help guide the transportation electrification infrastructure, transportation electrification investments in utility plans. So next one, Connor. And then just quickly, Fourth hasn't had the opportunity to engage too terribly much in the Washington legislature over the last couple of sessions for funding reasons, but we did engage a little bit on the couple of bills you see here. The House Bill 1091 finally got a clean fuel standard passed in Washington after many years of trying there. A number of you potentially have been watching that process up there. That bill will require a 20% reduction in carbon intensity of fuels by 2038. And then the program won't actually begin implementation until 2023, but we believe they're going to be starting up the rulemaking to figure out the details of that program later this fall, because the bill that passed essentially just sets up the program with very few sort of details filled in. And then the rulemaking will go back to sort out exactly how it's going to play out. And then finally, Senate Bill 5126, a number of you may have been tracking this one as well, the Climate Commitment Act, Washington's big cap and trade bill. And we're excited about that one because it, up to $5.2 billion is expected to be raised out of that cap and trade, cap and invest bill. With a bunch of that money directed towards transportation electrification projects over the next 15, 16 years. And so the legislature has to go through and sort of, create the programmatic funding areas through a later transportation package, either that'll come through next year's regular session. They're potentially convening another special session this year. But I think that bill creates a lot of opportunities in Washington for some, pretty strong investments in transportation electrification work up there. So Before I move on to the federal piece from Jeanette, I think I'll pause there to see if there are any quick questions or clarifications.
And feel free to drop that in the chat or just turn on your mic and ask directly if you got questions for Rhett.
Or we can answer more questions as we get through the rest of the slides as well. It was a lot to cover pretty quickly. So, okay, well, let's jump on to Jeanette's then. Jeanette Shaw here is our point person on all the federal work. So she compiled these handful of slides here that I'll just quickly walk through to give you the update. I mean, obviously, you know, a new administration, much more friendly to, to transportation electrification work. You know, they've stated a strong commitment, as you can see here, to climate, COVID-19 recovery, infrastructure, and equity. And, you know, so I think from our perspective, a sort of surprisingly big focus on you know, EV infrastructure and transportation electrification more generally. I know you know, most of you have heard about the big plans that are coming out of the administration, and so, you know, lots of money, lots of investments being planned, and so, you know, pretty excited about the prospects there. Okay, so next slide, Connor. And so, you know, the administration has introduced a number of bills to try to infuse the economy with you know, much more substantial resources to the eligible state, local, territorial, and tribal governments to, you know, both help reverse the negative impacts of the pandemic, address the economic fallout, and then, you know, start laying the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. You know, many of you know, heard about the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, which was signed in March of this year. And so, you know, that bill and surface transportation reauthorization work is sort of ongoing now. And, you know, for instance, here in the Oregon legislature, you know, that the money from ARPA is starting to trickle down to the state to, you know, figure out how they're going to use that money to recover from the economic downturn and from COVID, but also use that money to build up, you know, potentially build up infrastructure, you know, that can be done in a more sustainable and, we hope, electrified way. So then in the president's 2022 budget request, as you can see here, $2.6 billion in funding for electric vehicles has been proposed. So pretty excited to see that on the table, and you know, we'll be working closely with the administration, with partners in DC and other allies to try to make sure that money is going to the right places. And then, you know, just a ton of bills introduced in both the House and the Senate, and we can walk briefly through a handful of those on that next slide. So yeah, so as you can see here, just, you know, I don't know how many there are there, a dozen or more bills, and this is just, as you can see, just a partial listing. So Jeanette and our team have been engaging on a variety of these bills that we think will increase electric vehicle usage and deployment, with a particular focus on low-income and underserved communities. House Bill 1221 or House HR 1221, as you can 1221, as you can see here, is designed to increase deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in low-income communities and communities of color. The Federal Department of Energy will establish an EV charging equity program to increase deployment and accessibility of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So that one seems pretty exciting. HR 2012 will establish a grant program for installation of EV charging infrastructure and hydrogen fueling infrastructure along the national highway system. HR 1271, the Electric Cars Act, will modify and extend tax credits for electric cars and other alternative motor vehicles. And then S 432 would establish a grant program for electrifying and or retiring diesel-powered transport refrigeration units and certain heavy duty commercial vehicles. So, in short, a lot of opportunities out there, a lot of ways that we can increase electric vehicle usage. I think it's good, both for the bottom line of the country, excuse me, but also, need to work to make sure we're doing advanced planning for grid availability and storage and all the other factors that go into these sorts of analyses. So that's what I have from Jeanette on the federal side. And so again, happy to take any questions, any ones I can't answer. Perhaps there are folks on the line who've been tracking this stuff even more closely than I have, or if we have specific questions, I'm happy to get those answers back to you from Jeanette as well.
Hey, Rhett, any ideas on timing for federal funding? I mean, I know a lot of this is in the works right now, but realistically, when there might be funding available from the federal government?
I really don't know, Thomas. I mean, I think a lot of those sort of allocations obviously have to get rolled through Congress before they're distributed out. I mean, I do know that under ARPA, those funds are sort of being distributed out to the states, now basically or soon. And so, for instance, the Oregon State Legislature there, they've taken in, proposals for a whole bunch of projects that they will work through in the waning days of the legislative session, work through the Ways and Means process to try to figure out how they get that money, parceled out to the appropriate projects. So portions of it are happening already. But when we get the actual bigger scale investments in EV infrastructure coming from the feds, I don't really know. Maybe others on the call have more information on that. But I certainly can inquire with Jeanette and see if she's got a better timeline and get it back to this group.
I have a question. I'm Susie from Snohomish PUD. I heard that there were some industry groups who were kind of lobbying against incentives being accessible to consumer-owned utilities. And I don't know if it's specific to any one act or not, but I'm just curious if you have any comments on that, or if Fourth has taken a position on that.
On incentives, was that the question, Susie?
Yeah, incentive, or sorry, I think actually it was grant funding.
In Washington, it specifically is where you're asking about, just more generally. Oh, you're on mute, Susie.
I think it was at the federal level.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not the one who's tracking that. I'm happy to inquire with Jeanette. I mean, I'm not aware of those, of any specifics on that front. I'm not surprised, frankly, but happy to check with Jeanette to see if there's, information she can pass back to this group on, with details on it. But I'm not aware of those. So,
okay,
sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for the question, and I'll flag that I'll send out a recap email to everyone, so if we can find out any information on that and any other questions before, I'll make sure I include that in the follow-up. Well, if there are no other questions, we can move on. And next we have Thomas, who's going to highlight some new funding opportunities coming up from BEF. And thank you, Rhett. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Connor. Can you see my screen now?
Sure can.
Okay, great. I'm Senior Program Manager in the Renewables Group at Bonneville Environmental Foundation. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to get everyone thinking about the next round of zero emission vehicle innovation grants. We started this program in 2020 We awarded, I believe, 8 projects out of about 20 or so letters of interest that we received through that process. And I believe our LOIs came in April of 2020, and then our full applications that were invited came in June of 2020. So I'll talk about our timeline on this one, but it'll be somewhat similar with some similar focus. And this time around, individual grants will not exceed $40,000 per project, and we will have an amount in the program not to exceed $160,000 for this round of zero emission vehicle funding. And like so many different funding sources today, we have a very strong interest in projects that relate to underserved communities. So frontline communities, frontline environmental justice communities, low-income communities, and others that we're all familiar with. So similar to the last time around, applicants have to be preference utility customers of BPA. So basically the consumer-owned utilities in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Western Montana who purchase power from BPA. And then solutions that have potential to increase zero emission vehicle adoption and utilization within their service territories. Looking at underserved communities and in particular, multifamily housing, and not in particular, but in addition to the frontline communities and low income and BIPOC communities, we're also interested in multifamily housing and areas of service territories that don't have much public charging. So trying to fill in the gaps a little bit in the charging ecosystem. Last time around, we matched up to 75% of the project costs. This time we're gonna dial that back a little bit to 50%, and we're hoping for projects that can be implemented within 12 months. So just getting you thinking about this, we're gonna make a call for letters of interest in early September, and then I believe we should be able to move quick enough to ask for full applications in October of this year. So put this in your mind for the summer to think about what projects you might propose for September. And then just to be more specific, the funding priorities for us are increasing equitable access to zero emission vehicles, innovation for overcoming awareness, engagement, and adoption barriers. I think it's interesting when you look in Oregon, for example, which is tracking, all the zero emission vehicle data for the Clean Fuels program. Obviously, there are thousands of zero emission vehicles in Portland metro area. They're doing a pretty good job in some other places like Ashland. But in many of the consumer-owned utility territories, the number of zero emission vehicles is very low. And so, anything we can do to help start moving that in the upward direction. And I think also seeing some more medium duty and heavy duty vehicles coming on the market in a year or so. For example, the Ford F-150 Lightning that President Biden recently test drove and talked about, that should be available and pretty affordable in about maybe a little over 12 months now. We'd like to see projects that can be replicated by other COUs. Smart charging is important for demand response. If you have a project or program that you might want to look at smart charging for the longer term. And then, obviously we like to leverage our funds if there are other sources, maybe these federal sources that could be leveraged with BEF money and consumer and utility money for these. And a few of the projects that we funded last time around actually are returning some revenue back to BEF through the generation of their clean fuels credits in Oregon. And so that's another consideration. I think this is the last slide. Just So it is a two-step process. We ask for letters of interest first, and then we look at those, and then we'll invite full applications from a number of those, a subset of those letters of interest. And then just looking at the criteria for selection, the categories and priorities that I just mentioned, is the project goal clear and compelling, and then how it helps the utility overcome the barriers to zero emission vehicle growth in their territory. And then of course, underserved communities that we're interested in, how could the project provide benefits to those utility customers, including the underserved communities. So I think that is the last one. Yep. So September for letters of interest, and hopefully asking for applications in October. Letters of interest in September, applications in October. So any questions?
I have a question, Thomas. Will there be a report or a highlight of last year's funding projects and kind of the outcomes or of those?
You know, eventually there will be. We asked for projects that could be implemented within 12 months. I believe we had two programs, one with Orcus Power and Light and one with City of Ashland. And those have been, I think, the money has gone pretty well, and they've tracked, you know, the results of those. On the infrastructure projects, they have been more slowly being finished, especially due to COVID. And so we're asking for data on those, you know, charging sessions and number of kilowatt hours through those chargers. But I think we're not going to get that data probably, you know, they won't be able to start collecting it until probably September or October of this year. So maybe, you know, next spring we would have some data around those projects. Okay,
great. Infrastructure projects going slower than originally planned. Who would have saw that one coming?
You know, they might go a lot faster once a bunch of federal money, you know, is flowing. So I hope that's the case once we get through this COVID period.
Thomas, I have a quick question.
Sure.
This is Travis at Orcus Power and Light. Is there going to be any priority given to applicants who have not received these funds in the past, or is that a component of the grading of the applications?
We haven't talked about that internally yet, and we've only, you know, done this once before, so I don't have a good answer for you on that one.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
And if there are no more questions now, we can answer them at the end, or feel free to shoot Thomas an email directly. I'll make sure his email is included in the follow-up email so you can ask him. And I'll also just flag that it's kind of a segue to the next presentation. We're talking about some other funding opportunities and how utilities can work to get some potentially match funding for this project or for projects for the BF work. But that fourth is also a resource for putting together, you know, if you want to shoot some ideas around, you need some support, there may be opportunities for us to work together as well.
Hey, Connor, before we move on, I would just like to mention some of the utility people on the call are familiar with this electric vehicle car sharing program that BEF and Forth have been working on for maybe close to a year now, and have gotten some funds from the American Public Power Association. And so if that's something that your utility might be interested in participating in, I think that could be, you know, funding from the ZEVI program. Maybe it could be funding from some of the federal programs too. But if you're interested in the concept of electric vehicle car sharing with dedicated charging in your community, you should certainly get in touch with me or get in touch with Connor. And hopefully as we kick that off, it's been a little slower too because of COVID, but as that program gets going, I think that might be we'll have a focused presentation in this roundtable, maybe in the fall, maybe the next one in the spring.
Yeah, thank you for that highlight, Thomas. And definitely, I would hope to do a deeper dive on that in the next session. Hopefully, we have some progress on that. But also, Sam and Kelly, who are about to provide some content, will be giving us very high level overview of the car sharing concept as well. So hopefully that'll potentially pique a little more interest, and then you can, as Thomas said, reach back out to myself or him for more info, or if you're interested in getting involved.
Great.
So with that said, I will kick it over to Kelly, Sam. Not sure who's. You feel free to share your screen, and I don't know who's kicking it off. So
I think
Go
Sam's
for
going to
it.
share screen and I'll kick us off.
Sam is indeed going to share screen. Give me just one moment here.
And while Sam's doing that, I'll introduce myself to everybody on the call. My name is Kelly Stevens. I'm the Senior Manager of Strategic Communications and Partnerships at Forth. And Sam, who's kicking us off with our screen share here, is joining me as well. He is a Business Development Manager at Forth. And Sam and I are here representing our business development and fundraising team today. We're going to share some info with you all about potential funding and pilot project opportunities. The car sharing program that Thomas just referenced is one of those. So yeah, so I'm going to share a brief intro, and then Sam will go through the car sharing and other specific examples of what this can look like. And just as an overview, our business development and fundraising team at Forth, our role is to connect Forth and also our partners, including the utilities on this call, with funding and project opportunities. We see that as a way of supporting not just our mission-based work, but really our collective work to drive transportation electrification forward. So our partnerships with utilities, with the industry, with community and community organizations and frontline communities, all that combined really contributes to our mission and what we're all trying to do together. And sometimes Forth is leading the funding proposals and bringing utilities in to join us to respond to an RFP. And then sometimes we're bringing in our expertise and learning to projects that you as a utility might already have in motion. So it can look all sorts of different ways depending on what the project is. And so why should you care about outside funding? Not just because we're greedy for money, right? We have important work to do and we need the financial resources to do it. And so funding can go towards supporting innovative pilot projects that are designed by one utility, or maybe it's a group of utilities or a region of utilities, or maybe there's a pilot project that's already happening that's designed by another entity. And so you want to join the proposal and participate in that. And I will share with you all, there's a reason, truthfully, every time there's a funding opportunity or a pilot project that gets in motion, one of the first questions I hear at Forth is who is the local utility, or who are the local utilities that we need to reach out to and get their input and get them involved. So whether, again, that's us leading the project or projects we want to get you involved in, we always have our eyes out for that. And also, you know, all of the utilities here are absolutely critical players as far as Forth is concerned in getting projects off the ground as part of the broader transition to transportation electrification. And we really see it as a way to benefit utilities' business models and your ratepayers, and then also the wider community, economy, environment, all those good things. So let's go to the third slide, Sam, if you don't mind. And I'll just share a bit about what are these funding opportunities we're talking about. And Thomas just mentioned one example. And where or who are they coming from? So in one bucket, we have our government funding. This is federal, state, city. This can range from big federal Department of Energy all the way to Oregon Department of Transportation, Oregon DEQ, right? So we have the federal, state, and then municipal levels. And then there's even some smaller opportunities beyond that. And those can be pretty large RFPs that come out that, especially as this sector expands, are becoming really competitive. So Forth really enjoys our partnerships with utilities, with nonprofits, with the OEMs, everyone who's involved in this, to make our proposals competitive and make sure that our impact is really furthering this work. And then the other bucket is there's also a group of private foundations, How great is that, that want to fund this work? And there's a few examples here. I believe we have Alumbra, and hey, BEF is on the list. So the ZEVI opportunity that Thomas just mentioned, another great example of something that's out of that, DOE, DOT world of funding. And those can, again, some of them are national in scale, but there's also some regional focused efforts, and then some even more specific than that. And fourth, Sam, me, our team, the rest of our team that's not here today, we're always keeping an eye out for these opportunities in both of these buckets, and which members or partners might be good fits to partner with us in applying, or you might even apply on your own. So even if we don't have skin in the game, if we see an opportunity that we know is in your neighborhood and it might fund your utility work that's going to also support our mission, we're going to let you know, because we want to see, we just want to see this work happen, whether it's ours or not. And another observation I wanted to share is, so far transportation electrification efforts and the funding has really, it's mostly been focused on denser, more urban areas. And we are seeing an increased interest in potential funding in smaller and rural areas and utility regions as well. So I feel like for some that are on this call, that might be a promising trend, and we'll keep sharing opportunities out about that. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sam to talk more specifics.
Thanks, Kelly. So somewhat related to the last slide when we talked about the different types of funding opportunities, another thing to understand is when there's a really tailored RFP or when there's kind of more of an open-ended response. So when you're talking about federal, municipal, state opportunities, typically that RFP is going to be looking for a specific type of project almost to a T. Not a whole lot of room for creative interpretation. So, if you have a state looking to build a corridor charging along a highway, they're probably not going to be too receptive to your e-bus pilot. But on the other end, if you have a foundation that is soliciting proposals that benefit a community through clean air or greener transportation, that's a good time to go to the drawing board and think about innovative ways to design some kind of response. And so who might be reaching out to utility to talk about partnering on a potential pilot or project? It's really going to be the full gambit. So when you're talking about federal opportunities, you may see any number of these types of entities trying to engage a utility as part of a team. As it starts to get more creative and granular into really targeted pilot specific opportunities, you may be approached by just a single one of these entities. So for example, using that highway corridor charging opportunity as another example, there you would see a team comprised likely of local municipalities that may be affected by the corridor, as well as OEMs and EVSE manufacturers. So the charging providers themselves will want to have a utility or multiple utilities engaged on that project so that they can assist with site location and then obviously the infrastructure work itself. Another partner that you might consider working with or may want to work with you is engineering implementation firms. So for any kind of large infrastructure project, typically the prime respondents of those are going to be your Nelson Nygaard, larger engineering firms that do all kinds of work like this. And again, they're going to look to engage with the utility as a partner, whether it's just through having the support on the project or for something a little bit more deeper. So this is very subjective to start talking about the roles that a utility may play in any given project. However, these are just some of the types of roles that we've seen. And I'll note that in the blue, I'm really running through as a team member. And there's a couple of things I'd like to call out on the orange if a utility were to prime responding to a funding opportunity themselves. So cost share, that's always going to be something to consider if you're invited to a proposal. Typically, the way a utility can contribute cost share is through staff time or through actual cash cost share. Through staff time, that's typically going to look like an innovative pilot program that's being designed. Utility staff time may be used as cost share, but it's really the utility assisting with the implementation and management of that portion of the project. there's also typically some kind of data provided from the utility, so you can study, rate usage, things like that. And then just things to consider as a prime. So if a utility were to respond to an RFP themselves, you're going to be doing a lot of kind of the paperwork that's associated with any kind of grant opportunity, particularly when you're getting into the state and federal level. There's obviously the project management scope of the work, so you'll be managing the other team members that are implementing the project or pilot. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple of examples of projects that we've done here at Fourth that did engage with utilities and have them as partners on applications. One of them, which we were talking about earlier with Thomas, is AMP, or the Affordable Mobility Platform. This concept is a self-service ride and drive that essentially members of a community can access an electric vehicle to rent out at decent rates for a matter of hours or a full day. And the benefit to utilities is that they can place this into their service territory and have an electric vehicle that folks can not only utilize for running errands, but also have this opportunity to interact with an EV at all, which is something that we know from experience can be kind of the tipping point into getting people behind the wheel for the next vehicle purchase. And so in this particular pilot, utilities are providing some of the cost share, which goes directly toward purchasing the vehicle, and in the case that there isn't charging available, installing charging equipment as well. But the benefit is that because this is still in its pilot stage, the utilities also get access to this platform and all promotional material. So there's really kind of you can view it as offsetting the cost of building a program internally specific to that utility's territory. By joining this pilot, they have access to the platform and for all of this promotional material, as well as technical assistance at a significantly reduced cost, really just looking at the cost of the vehicle and equipment. And then this is another example of a utility joining a team. This one's a little bit less traditional, I would say, and for a lot of reasons. So Fourth is running an electric tractor pilot in the Pacific Northwest. Essentially, we have an electric tractor that we are moving around a couple of different rural farms in the area. I mean, the idea is to take a different approach to advancing rural electrification. So this project is a little bit complex from the partnership angle. We wanted to have lots of local context and presence. So, this nonprofit from Oregon, from Portland, surprisingly does not know a whole lot about how a farm works. And so we had to engage with lots of partners at the local level to assist with actually interacting with the farms, and then multiple funders as well. And the utilities joined this project not only as a funder, but as a communications and distribution partner as well. So really helping to promote the project, get the word out, and make it known that we're running these innovative types of pilots in their service territory. So that's all that we have for you. Kelly and I would be happy to take any questions you may have. Stop sharing my screen here.
I have a comment or question. I'm wondering about businesses, are the ones that clearly see the advantage of electric vehicles, when fuel cost is half of gasoline costs, service costs are much lower. Do you see any ways that, businesses could be engaged in these types of proposals to show the benefit of electric vehicles to the business community?
That's a really good question. At least in my experience, I think typically engagement with the private businesses is going to be the result of one of these pilot programs. So for example, take a workplace certification program. So you seek funding to design a certification for businesses that are willing to install chargers and conduct outreach to their employees about the benefits of driving electric. So then the result of that pilot would then be providing a service to local businesses. I do think there's opportunity for bringing in especially larger employers to some type of response, but it would really depend on the opportunity. And you would then be talking about to build something for a single employer and then trying to scale it outside of that specific employer. I think it's certainly plausible, but just not typically the flow of operations.
also add that, yeah, fleets are increasingly interesting and going to be a huge thing, and that creates a whole different world of things when you're dealing with hundreds of vehicles at a single location, and what the implications of that could be. So I think there could be some very cool opportunities coming up. And I think at a future one of these roundtable sections, specifically focusing on some fleet specific content is a goal that we have.
And I would just add, we're mostly working largely with rural utilities. And so, it's not going to be necessarily giant fleets, but I'm really interested. I mean, Amazon and UPS, I mean, they're already, have vehicles on order. They're going to be going this route, but to have some sort of a pilot, and maybe some of the utility people on the call have ideas about fleets, smaller fleets in their immediate community. That might be a demonstration, because so much of the EV work has happened in the urban areas, but the opportunities are equally good in the rural areas for the right fleets.
I think that's spot on. I'll also add that a lot of the RFPs that you see being issued at the municipal level are for EV readiness plans. So essentially a full transition for anticipating this increased amount of electric vehicles on the road. It usually has an infrastructure and an outreach component, but almost every single one that I've seen also has a municipal fleet electrification component. So respondents have to come up with a realistic plan for converting the city's vehicles to electric.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Sam. I'll have emails for them in the recap sent out, so you can reach out to them directly. If you are interested specifically in the AMP car sharing project, definitely reach out directly to myself or Thomas, and we can provide some more info and talk about that. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer Harper at Energy Northwest, who's going to bring another real world example of some of this collaboration and funding opportunities coming to fruition. And you are muted, Jennifer, if you were not aware.
Realize that. Thank you. Can you see the Evita logo?
I can, yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about Energy Northwest and the Evita program, what that means, and where we're headed. So let's see if I can get my screen to actually move now. Okay, so I'm Jennifer Harper. I'm a project developer with Energy Northwest. I have been with Energy Northwest since 2008. For about the first 7 years, I worked at our 9 Canyon Wind project in the operations and administration there. Moved into our project development group about 5 years ago, and have been working on our electric vehicle initiatives since 2016. So Energy Northwest, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk a little bit about Energy Northwest, just give you an idea of who we are if you're not aware of us, what the Evita program is, what our past, current, and future projects are, and then additional areas that we think ourselves should be involved, or that utilities can be involved. I'm not going to go too deep into how to write a grant application. That's been covered a little bit here today on how to look for funding. But most of the projects that we've worked on have been grant funded projects as far as the electric vehicle projects. So Energy Northwest, we're a joint operating agency which was formed by the state of Washington in 1957. We represent 27 member utilities, which are all public utilities and municipalities. Our purpose really is to aggregate the needs for the benefit of public power. Mainly, we own and operate generation, such as Columbia Generating Station, 9 Canyon Wind Project, Packwood Lake Hydro Project, And the Horn Rapids Solar and Storage Project is actually a partnership between us and 2C Energy Services, where we own and operate the 1 megawatt battery energy storage system that's coupled with a 4 megawatt solar array. But we also operate other generation resources. We maintain hydro facilities in both, well, actually Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And we provide professional and technical services such as environmental testing, calibrations. We operate the Evita EV charging network, which I'll talk about in my presentation. But we really do have quite a bit of services that we can provide to utilities, not just our members, and also to communities and sometimes to private industry. So when I talk about Evita, what that stands for is the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Transportation Alliance. It really was formed by a group of our member utilities that came to us interested in installing or supporting the installation of EV charging networks, specifically DC fast chargers in underserved corridors in Washington state. And of the underserved corridor that we were looking at that time was the Tri-Cities and Central Washington areas. And so we all got together and started looking at what the opportunities were, learning about charging infrastructure and the lingo and what that meant and what the benefits would be to the utilities, what kind of questions they might get from their customers, and set out to look for grant funding. At that time, originally it was Benton PUD, Franklin PUD, the City of Richland's Energy Services, and Benton Rural Electric Association. As we got a little bit further into finding out where the gaps were and what we wanted to propose as a project at that time, we brought in the City of Ellensburg's Energy Services and Grant PUD. Kittitas PUD was also a supporter at the time and still is. There's one station installed in Cle Elum, which is in their service territory. We received support and interest from many community members throughout all of those utility service areas, from ports, cities, counties, their economic development associations, tourism groups, private citizens, the EV associations. And so we had probably 25 letters of support that were submitted when we applied for grant funding for that project. We continue to use the Evita name and branding basically as we build out the network beyond just the original 9 stations that were funded. We did receive a grant from Washington State Department of Transportation that include 9 DC fast chargers, which each were coupled with a level 2 charger. The DC fast chargers were 50 kW. And they were installed in Cle Elum, Ellensburg, Yakima, Prosser, Richland, Pasco, Kennewick, Connell, and Moses Lake. And I might have missed one in there. I don't think I did. But so at the time, the furthest east charger on I-90 was at Suncadia. And that was one of the original West Coast Electric Highway stations with only the Chatamo port. And so this brought the state West Coast Electric Highway chargers all the way to as east as Pasco, and then up to Connell. So technically you could travel throughout the state. You couldn't get everywhere, but you could travel east throughout the state with the installation of the Evita network. These are just some of the branding, as you can see, and the ribbon cutting. This was at the Yakima station. The Yakima station is a Pacific Power service territory, and so I actually have a little bit more to talk about on that in a minute. But we did get the grant from WashDOT. This was, I think we signed the contract in 2017. And so it was 2018 and 19 for the construction. The the partnership really was that Energy Northwest was the prime applicant to the grant. Green Lots was the private partner, and it's their network. They own 6 of the charging stations. They were able to find site hosts that were interested in owning 2 of the stations, and then Energy Northwest purchased the station that is installed in Moses Lake with Grant County PUD. We continue to be involved with that network, although Green Lots does still have primary ownership of most of it. We monitor the usage and contact them if we get communications that something is down or needs attention. So it's really been a good learning experience for us, and has it's allowed us to consider what ownership looks like for us. And so that is the model that we are pursuing at this time. So since that original grant, we have received 2 grants from Pacific Power to install charging stations in their service territories. One is in Dayton, Washington, which is about 75 miles east of Pasco. So, picks up that route again on Highway 12. And then Natchez, Washington, which is about 30 minutes west of Yakima. And so as you go along the White Pass Scenic Byway, after Yakima, Natchez is the first stop. We did receive funding from Washington State Department of Commerce to install 6 stations on the White Pass Scenic Byway, with additional award notification from TransAlta Coal Transition Fund to add 2 more on that route. Those are still pending the contract negotiation with Commerce, but we are very excited to get started very soon. I talked about this pretty much already in my last slide and discussion on the WashDOT grant. And so the Pacific Power grants, they were doing it quarterly. I'm not sure that they're doing it as often now, but they offer grants to non-residential customers in their service area. They consider that a lease, so Energy Northwest has leased property from both the cities of Natchez and Dayton on public park areas to install these chargers. And so that in turn allowed us to become a customer of Pacific Power. The Natchez one is in development. It will be installed this summer, and Dayton was installed in December. We also additionally, those were in collaboration with communities on the Dayton station. It was actually a Columbia REA representative that contacted me. He was lives in the city of Dayton and was really interested, along with their Chamber of Commerce, in getting a fast charger installed. As it turned out, the property that was really the ideal property for the station was in Pacific Power's territory. So we were able to apply for the grant. And that's the station, the charger in Dayton. As I said, we were working on the White Pass Scenic Byway. That one is also in partnership with Lewis Public Utility District and Twin Transit. So the stations the funding will cover the installation of the passenger vehicle charging, but we are collaborating with Twin Transit for siting in order to ensure that the sites we select are large enough to install some wave induction chargers for their electric buses. Not all 8 sites will have the bus charging, but we are incorporating at least bus pullouts or some bus parking locations for bus stops at each location as well. These will go from the White Pass Ski Summit to the I-5 exit, or the exit 68 from I-5 onto Highway 12. That one we also received quite a bit of support from the communities and their business associations, local business owners, etc. So like it was said earlier, there's a lot of different funding sources. And as far as Energy Northwest, because we're a joint operating agency, which makes us a government agency, we're also considered a retail utility, both by the Washington State as well as others, because we do have some retail electric customers. And so it allows us to serve as prime applicant to partner with our utility customers and also serve as support if another entity like a utility wants to be lead on a grant application. But we have received funding from community foundations, other types of projects that we're working on, including demand response, our internship program. We have applied for funding from anywhere from state to federal funding, as well as the American Public Power Association has a deed program that that provides grant funding once a year as well. With our initiatives as well, we attend community events. There's in Tri-Cities, there is a River Fest each year, and we put together a game, the Evita game, that basically has questions about if your car had a range of 80 miles and you want to drive to, you pull another card that says, oh, Seattle, and it tells you how far that town is from Columbia Park here in Tri-Cities, and asks if you can drive there in that car. And there's a map that shows where all the different charging stations are in the state. And you typically, because it's kids, they'll say, oh no, you can't, because it's your car won't make it if the range is only this much. And then we can tell them how, no, you can stop and charge, and kind of teach them a little bit about driving electric as well. We made the game in my backyard, and it's not quite industrial strength. It needs glue every once in a while. So the other things that we continue to work on is that we are continuing to engage with utilities throughout the state to develop similar aggregated networks in anticipation of further funding announcements. It's a shame that we can't do everything all at the same time, but we are really looking forward to some of the projects that we expect to be able to submit for grants in the near future. We have participated in and support larger federal funding concept papers where we're not the prime, but we're able to provide input and hopefully get some benefits for state communities and utilities through these federal funds if awarded in the future. We're also collaborating with other utilities, nonprofits on researching solutions for charging infrastructure in rural areas, trying to think of ways to blend what the needs are for charging with maybe other needs in the communities. And so that one's been really interesting. And then we're also investigating what role in hydrogen fueling infrastructure can Energy Northwest play, or our utilities play. So we're looking both at fueling infrastructure as well as production, storage, and distribution. We participate in a number of stakeholder groups and just trying to learn as much as we can about what kind of benefits we can provide to our utilities, both our members and their customers, as well as any non-Energy Northwest utilities that may play a role. For instance, as Benton Rural Electric Association is a co-op, but they're right here in the same network as, or the same community as some of our members, Benton PUD, Franklin PUD, the city of Richland. And so it made perfect sense to bring them into the Evita project, whether or not they were a member of Energy Northwest. Other areas we're involved, we participate in ride and drive events, both in supporting, providing information, or leading and conducting those. Participating in community festivals and the ribbon cuttings for for the charging stations. And we are also participate in WSU's Green Transportation Program, their Alternative Fuels and Vehicles Technical Assistance Group. If you haven't heard of that, that is a really, really great resource that holds meetings every other month on a Friday and has some really great speakers. And then the Electric Vehicle Association, Plug in America, fourth, the two different Clean Cities Coalitions, Columbia-Willamette Clean Cities Coalition and the Western Washington Clean Cities Coalition, have also been great resources for us, as well as our utilities. So that concludes what we're where my presentation was. I'm sure I skipped some of the things that we are working on or that we can work on, but anybody have any questions?
Quick question, Jennifer, is there opportunity to do another similar, expand upon the Evita project specifically for utilities that may want to get infrastructure on corridors in Washington or perhaps in other states as well?
Yes, and yes. We're constantly looking for different funding opportunities. We have had a lot of interest from many of our members and others that, like I said, are not necessarily our members, on trying to find funding on specific sites. And so that's where the Pacific Power piece came into play. If it made sense at the time, then we did apply for it. But we're really looking forward and hopeful for an announcement from the Washington State Department of Transportation to, similar to that previous grant, but other state funding opportunities or even federal, as they become available, we'll look at them and see their relevance for both those that I always say that we have in the hopper, those that we've already been working with utilities and have a plan laid out. We just have to find the funding. And then others where maybe there's some specific requirement of a grant that we hadn't considered previously, then we'll kind of take a look at what we know we have available, or maybe somebody that hadn't been interested before but is right for that specific grant. As far as Oregon or other states, we haven't done that previously, but we have not ruled it out and would consider working with utilities outside of Washington if it made sense to us and to them.
Great, thanks. And want to make sure we reserve time a little bit behind schedule, but last but not least here, we have Matt Babbitts from Clark PUD, and excited to hear what they've been cooking up as he talks about their new transportation electrification plan.
Well, thanks so much, Connor. Let me just test real quick that you can see the slides.
Yep, I can.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here and share a little bit about some of the efforts related to our TE plan and EV programs over at Clark. I know we're running short on time. I only have a few slides here, so I'll try to get through them in about 10 minutes or so. I should mention, for those of you not familiar with Clark Public Utilities, we're just across the river from Portland, Oregon, and we're the public utility district that serves Clark County, including Vancouver, Washington. The last few months, there's been a lot going on related to transportation electrification. I'm very pleased to report that our Board of Commissioners adopted our transportation electrification plan on March 2nd of this year. And when that happened, when that step took place, that really allowed the team at Clark to start developing our customer-facing electric vehicle incentive programs. I did want to mention that there is a law, RCW 5416.430 in Washington State, that does regulate transportation electrification plans for public electric utilities. And there is a funding limit that's set to all the different programs that we can offer to our customers. It's set at 1/4% of our annual revenue requirement. And for Clark, that's about $1 million each year that we potentially have on the table to fund these programs that we've developed. For the calendar year 2021, our Board of Commissioners set a budget of $800,000. So not a huge amount of money, but it's a decent size amount of funding, and we're really looking forward to getting the programs up and started and incentive checks out to our customers. Now, I'm not going to walk through the full transportation electrification plan. It's about a 13-page document. It is available on our public website at clarkpublicutilities.com. But I did want to point out a few of the high-level objectives that we built into the plan. First and foremost, we certainly want to promote electric vehicle adoption in our service territory. But it's also important to the utility and our leadership that we, of course, maintain the reliable, safe, and affordable electricity service that our customers expect from us. It's also important from our perspective to start collecting different charging and load data related to transportation electrification for grid planning purposes. We want to make sure that we have that robust electric service into the future, and that the grid doesn't ever become a barrier for rapid adoption of electric vehicles, which we are anticipating. And then on the program side, we certainly wanted to create equitable and accessible programs to all of our customers at Clark Public Utilities, including some of the limited and lower income demographics. And one of the programs I'm going to speak to today was created specifically with that customer demographic in mind. And then, of course, we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally. Clark Public Utilities is primarily a hydroelectric utility. We're generally about 65 to 70% carbon free. So switching from a gas-powered vehicle to an EV using our electricity represents about a 90% reduction in transportation emissions. So the potential for emissions reduction is quite large. So let's move on to the programs. I did want to give the group an overview of the programs. These programs went into effect April 2nd, so they've been up and running for about 2 months now, and they've started off strong. We've had a lot of participation so far. On the residential side, we've introduced 2 different level 2 charger incentives. We're offering a $500 rebate for the installation of a Energy Star certified unit that has the ability to connect to the internet, generally through a Wi-Fi signal. That's important to the utility, as you can imagine, because having a way to capture some of that charging data and different metrics is really important to ensuring that we can maintain that robust grid. The rebate form we developed, we are asking the customers to sign off and agree to be contacted in the future to potentially participate in any demand response or load management programs that we want to introduce to our EV owner customers. We also developed a qualified product list of the different level 2 chargers that are both connected and Energy Star certified. And I wanted to point out that the Bonneville Power Administration does have a conservation measure associated with the installation of level 2 chargers. So we're actually able to capture a little bit of conservation savings with each one of these rebates we pay out. Now, we also understand that there's customers that may want to go with a specific brand that is not Energy Star certified or doesn't have the ability to connect to the internet. So we have a smaller $100 rebate for customers who choose one of those models. So any 240 volt level 2 charger will qualify. And if they don't meet the Energy Star certification and the connectability requirement, they just get the $100 rebate. Now, on the limited income demographic, we created a used EV rebate program. And this is one that really the whole team from the top down at the utility is really excited about. We're offering a $2,000 rebate to customers who income qualify at 200% of the federal poverty level, and a $1,000 rebate for customers that income qualify at 300% of the federal poverty level. We are kind of going with the honor system on this. So the rebate form that we created has the customer self-certify their income levels. We take a look at their past 3 months of household income and make a determination based on those levels. And we do have a requirement that the used EV must cost $20,000 or less before rebate. It also has to be registered, of course, here in Clark County, Washington, which is our service territory. I should also point out that the used EVs do need to be 100% electric or BEVs. The plug-in hybrids do not qualify for this program. And then I found a 2011 Leaf there that I pasted on this. Hasn't changed too much. But one of the things I will note is we really are starting to see that used EV market grow. And we think this program can hopefully open the door to EV ownership to households that otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity to participate in the technology. And since we launched this in early April, we've had a handful of customers participate. So it's not breaking the bank at this point, but we are starting to see some participation in the program, which is exciting. Then I quickly wanted to mention on the business customer side or the commercial side, we are also offering that level 2 charger rebate, including the requirement that it needs to be Energy Star certified and have the ability to connect to the internet. There's no limit to the volume of chargers or rebates that we'll pay out for one business site. We certainly didn't want our program to be a barrier that would result in less EV chargers than the customer wanted to put in. So as long as there's budget available, because we do have that funding limit, we are not putting any limit on the number of chargers business customers can install. Business customers can install networked or non-network chargers depending on their needs. We've had customers do both, some that want to have a publicly available charger where they can charge a fee for service for members of the public, and other customers that are interested in just having charging infrastructure for their employees who drive EVs to work every day. Also wanted to point out any government agencies that are looking to increase their EV fleets at their facility. Behind the kind of security gate chargers for those kind of agencies certainly would qualify for this program as long as they meet the Energy Star certification and the connectability requirement. And then the last program I want to speak about is related to a lot of the other presenters' topics we talked about today, and that is the grant program that we've created here at Clark Public Utilities. We're calling it the EVgo program for electric vehicle grant opportunity. And this is a grant program that's available to state and local government agencies and municipalities that are located in our service territory. The grant covers up to 50% of the project cost. And one of the things we learned in some of the earlier previous work we've done around EV infrastructure is oftentimes it's not the purchase price of the charging infrastructure itself that's the cost barrier. It's some of the ancillary work that comes along with it, like the electric service upgrades, installing a new transformer, laying underground conduit, those kind of different construction costs. So this grant will cover 50% of all those aggregated costs, which was something we were pretty excited about. The program aims to increase publicly available charging infrastructure in our service territory, and also to promote innovative transportation electrification projects. Our Board of Commissioners allocated 25% of the annual funding to this program. So for 2021, we had $200,000 to fund projects. And we have selected 3 projects I wanted to quickly touch on. The first one's really exciting. C-Tran is our mass transit agency here in Clark County, Washington. And they've recently procured 8 electric buses, and they're in the process of procuring several DC fast chargers to make sure those buses are charged up. So we were able to offer them a $100,000 grant to help in the purchase of those of the charging infrastructure. That one's pretty exciting. And then Waste Connections is the company who does all the garbage collection here in Clark County. So they operate under the county's service contract. And they are introducing an all 100% electric garbage disposal truck that also had quite a bit of charging infrastructure requirements to make sure that it's charged up and ready to go each day. And we were able to offer them a grant to help fund some of that charging infrastructure. And then one of the smaller municipalities in our service territory, the city of Ridgefield, was a little bit of a desert when it came to publicly available EV charging, especially in the kind of downtown corridor. So we were able to assist them with a grant project to install their first 2 publicly accessible level 2 chargers in their downtown area. So that was kind of exciting. And then this grant program will continue on each year. So starting in 2022, we'll have another round of funding available from our TE plan budget. And we'll be looking to work with other government government and local agencies in our service territory, and hopefully increase the amount of public charging out there in Clark County. So with that, I know we're real short on time, Connor. I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we've been working on at Clark. And if there's any questions, I think we got a couple minutes I could answer that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. It's super interesting stuff with especially the bus project and the waste management project. I didn't know that you had that going on, so that's very cool. Yeah, opening up to any questions for Matt. And I had one. Do you have I know you have that 800K budget that was passed. Do you have a limit on, I think you said for the chargers, you didn't have like a limit just until the funds, I guess, run out. But for the rebate, for the low income qualified electric vehicle rebate, did you allocate a certain amount of budget for that? Or is that, until see how popular it is?
Yeah, the way we set it up, Connor, good question, by the way, is we're not going to exceed $200,000 with that specific program. So that would allow us to process 100 rebates at the $2,000 level. One other requirement I didn't mention on the slide is there's each customer is available to take advantage of that program one time. We didn't want to run into a situation where customers are selling the same used EV back and forth and collecting our rebate over and over. So we're going to be pretty strict on that, but we certainly are hoping to get some activity, some more activity in that. We think it's a really cool program. And I think there was somebody from Ashland Electric who I should give kudos to, because I believe it was one of their presentations that kind of sparked that idea for Clark. I know they have a used EV program. So thank you, Ashland.
Give a little shout out to Stu down in Ashland. I see he's on the call somewhere. Yeah, and anyone else? We're about at the end of the call. I want to thank everyone for participating, and share if you have any projects or topics that you would like to forward to get some speakers to talk about, or if you would like to present yourself similar to Matt, would love to have you on, so you can reach directly out to me, and we can set that up. And look forward to, we'll have 2 more this year. We'll have a Q3 and Q4 meeting as well. Agenda still TBD on those, but be on the lookout for some emails, and yeah, well, hopefully we can keep the T ball rolling. And I guess we'll call it there. Thank you to our speakers, and Rhett, Sam, Kelly, Matt, Jennifer, Thomas, and yeah, catch you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Connor.
Thanks, Connor. Great meeting.
Thanks, everybody.